In a big house at the end of a quiet street, a young maid worked from early morning until late at night. She was always the first to wake up and the last to rest. Every day began the same way. She would sweep the marble floor, polish the furniture, wash the dishes, and make sure every corner of the house was spotless before the family woke up. The family who lived there barely noticed her, except when they needed something. They didn't ask how she was or whether she had eaten. They only gave orders. Sometimes they shouted when she made the smallest mistake, even when it wasn't her fault. She never argued. She just lowered her head and said softly, "I'm sorry," then went back to work. Her clothes were always simple and a little worn. Her hands were dry from soap and cleaning liquid. Yet she worked quietly, never complaining, never raising her voice. The children in the house didn't treat her kindly either. They often made fun of her accent, her clothes, and even the way she walked. When she passed by carrying a tray or a broom, they would whisper and laugh. Sometimes they would purposely spill something just to make her clean it again. But what no one knew was that inside that same house, behind all the silence and hard work, lived a secret that no one could imagine. At night, when everyone was asleep, she would quietly walk to the living room. The lights were off, the whole house silent. In the corner stood a shiny black piano. It was the family's pride, but no one played it much. The maid would sit down on the small stool, her heart beating fast. She was always afraid someone might wake up and find her there. Her fingers would hover above the keys for a moment, trembling slightly. Then slowly she would start to play. At first it was only a few simple notes, uncertain and soft. But soon the room would fill with a sweet melody, sad, deep, and beautiful. Her thin fingers moved across the keys with such care, as if the piano was the only friend she ever had. She had learned to play when she was a little girl. Her father once worked at a small restaurant where an old piano stood near the door. The owner sometimes let her sit there after closing hours. There was an old man who played songs for customers, and he taught her little by little, showing her which keys made which sounds. She never took lessons, never owned sheet music, but she remembered every sound by heart. When her family fell into debt and she had to work as a maid, she thought she had lost that part of her life forever. But seeing the piano in this house brought the memories back. Every note reminded her of who she used to be and who she could still become. She played quietly, always careful not to wake anyone. Sometimes tears fell as she played. The piano became her secret world, a place where no one could yell at her or make her feel small. One night, as she played a tune she remembered from her childhood, she didn't notice that someone had woken up. The youngest daughter of the family, about 10 years old, had gotten up to get a glass of water. As she walked through the hallway, she froze when she heard music. It was soft but full of emotion. She peeked into the living room and saw the maid sitting at the piano, her face calm and focused, her eyes closed. The girl watched for a few minutes, amazed. She had never seen anyone play like that. But being a child, she didn't think much of it and quietly went back to her room. The next morning at breakfast, she said casually, "I heard music last night. Someone was playing the piano." Her parents looked at her in surprise. "That's impossible," her father said. "Everyone was asleep." "I'm telling the truth," she insisted. "It was beautiful." Her older brother laughed. "Maybe you were dreaming." "No," she said again. "I saw her. The maid was playing." Everyone at the table laughed. Even the mother shook her head. "Don't be silly," she said. "She can barely read, let alone play piano." The maid was standing nearby serving tea. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept her eyes down. She didn't say a word. That day, the family whispered about it among themselves. The older son even teased the maid a few times, asking her to play a concert for them. She stayed quiet, pretending not to hear. But inside, she was scared. She promised herself never to touch the piano again. For the next few days, she kept her distance from the piano. Every time she passed by it, she felt her heart ache a little. It was like walking past an old friend and pretending not to know them. But after a week, she couldn't resist anymore. One night, when everyone was asleep again, she found herself sitting in front of the piano. Her fingers moved almost by themselves. The music came out like a whisper at first, then grew stronger. This time she played a melody that came from deep within her, something she had never heard anywhere else. It was sad but full of hope. Every note told a story of pain and longing, of someone trapped in silence but still dreaming. Without her knowing, the eldest son had been awake, scrolling through his phone in his room. He heard the faint sound of music coming from downstairs. Curious, he tiptoed to the living room. When he saw who was playing, his eyes widened. He stood there, hidden behind the door, watching in disbelief. He didn't interrupt her. Instead, he pulled out his phone and started recording a video. The maid played for almost 10 minutes, completely lost in the music. When she finally stopped, she looked around nervously, then quietly went back to her small room beside the kitchen. The next morning, the eldest son showed the video to his friends at school. They couldn't believe it. "No way," one of them said, laughing. "Your maid plays like that?" He smirked. "Yeah, it's crazy, right? I'll post it online. People will get a kick out of this." He uploaded the video with the title, "The Maid Who Thinks She's a Pianist." At first, he thought it would just be a small joke between friends. But by evening, thousands of people had watched it. Comments started flooding in. "Who is this? She's amazing." That's real emotion. You can feel her pain. "Please tell me more about her story." The video kept spreading faster than anyone expected. People shared it, saying it was one of the most touching piano performances they'd ever seen. Back at the house, the maid knew nothing about it. She continued her work as usual, unaware that millions of eyes were watching her video online. But things began to change. That night, the eldest son came home looking nervous. His mother was angry and holding her phone. "What did you do?" she demanded. He tried to explain that it was just a joke, but his mother scolded him. "Do you know how embarrassing this is? Everyone is calling, asking who our maid is." The maid stood quietly in the corner, confused and scared. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked softly. No one answered her. The family didn't know what to do. They wanted to delete the video, but it was already everywhere. Later that night, she went back to her small room and cried quietly. She had only played because it made her feel alive. Now she thought she was in trouble for it. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. When she went out to buy groceries, a woman at the store stopped her. "Are you the one who plays the piano?" the woman asked. The maid froze. I don't know what you mean." The woman smiled kindly. "Everyone's talking about you. You play beautifully. You have a gift." The maid's eyes widened in disbelief. For the first time, someone had said something kind to her, something that made her heart feel warm. When she returned to the house, the eldest son looked embarrassed. People really liked the video," he said quietly. "They're calling you a genius." She didn't know what to say. A part of her was afraid, but another part, one she had long buried, felt hope rising again. That night, when she sat in front of the piano once more, her hands no longer trembled with fear. She closed her eyes and began to play. This time the music was different. It was stronger, braver. It told a story that was just beginning. The story of a woman who had been invisible all her life but was finally being seen. The melody rose softly through the house, touching every corner as if whispering, "This is who I really am." She didn't know what the future would bring. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of being heard, and that was the night when everything quietly began to change. The video of the maid playing piano kept spreading online like a quiet storm that no one could stop. At first, the family thought it would fade away after a few days, but it didn't. More and more people shared it, saying they had never heard such deep and honest music before. Some said they could feel the pain and hope in every note. Others wanted to know who she was and where she learned to play like that. But inside the house, things were tense. The family didn't like the attention. They were worried that people would think they had mistreated her. The mother told everyone not to mention the video again. "Let it die down," she said. "Soon people will forget." The maid, however, couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time she passed the piano, her heart felt warm and scared at the same time. She had never meant to show her music to anyone. Playing had always been her way of surviving her loneliness. But now strangers were talking about her, calling her talented, even gifted. She couldn't understand it. One evening, while she was cleaning the living room, the eldest son walked in. He looked uneasy. "Hey," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have posted that video. I didn't think it would get this big." She looked up, surprised. He had never spoken to her kindly before. "It's okay," she said softly. "I didn't know people would watch it." He nodded awkwardly. "You're really good, you know. People love it." Then, almost in a whisper, he added, "Better than most." Professional, she didn't know how to respond. Compliments were rare in her world. "Thank you," she said simply and went back to dusting the shelves. That night, when everyone was asleep, she sat again at the piano. The house was quiet, but this time the silence didn't scare her. It felt peaceful. She began to play a new melody, one she had been hearing in her mind all day. It was soft at first, but it grew stronger as she went on, full of emotion she didn't know how to express in words. She played for herself, but deep inside, she also played for all the people who had believed in her, even if she didn't know their names. Meanwhile, far away, a well-known music teacher came across her video. He watched it several times, replaying certain moments. Her technique was imperfect, but the feeling in her music was something he had rarely seen. It was raw and pure. He wanted to find her. He asked around online, posted comments, and reached out to the person who uploaded the video, the eldest son. When the message came, the boy was shocked. He read it again and again before showing it to his parents. The teacher wanted to meet the woman in the video, to offer her free lessons and possibly help her join a music program. The parents were nervous. "We can't let this go public," the father said firmly. "It'll bring more attention." "But she deserves it," the son argued. "She's the one who played," the mother shook her head. "She works for us. This isn't her place." The maid overheard part of the conversation while serving tea. Her hands trembled. She didn't know what they were talking about in detail, but she heard her name and the word piano. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what it meant. The next morning she gathered her courage and asked the eldest son, "Did someone want to talk to me about the piano?" He hesitated, then nodded. "A music teacher. He saw your video. He wants to meet you." Her eyes widened. "Me?" He nodded again. "Yes, he said you have real talent." She didn't know whether to smile or cry. For a moment she imagined herself sitting in a real classroom, learning music properly, maybe performing one day. But the thought felt too big for her small world. She shook her head slowly. "That's not for someone like me." "Why not?" the boy asked. She smiled sadly. "People like me don't get chances like that." He looked at her, not knowing what to say. Later that evening, the boy told his parents that the teacher had arranged a small visit to their town. He wanted to stop by the next day. The parents argued about it, but in the end they agreed to let him come, just to keep things calm. The next afternoon, a tall man in his 50s arrived at the house, carrying a small black folder. He introduced himself politely and asked to see the maid. She came into the room nervously, wiping her hands on her apron. "Are you the one in the video?" the teacher asked kindly. She nodded shyly. "Yes, sir," he smiled. "You play beautifully. Where did you learn?" She hesitated. "I never learned properly, I just listened and remembered." The teacher nodded slowly, impressed. "That's remarkable. You have something very rare, natural feeling. You don't just play the notes. You tell a story." The family watched quietly as he spoke. They couldn't believe how respectfully he was talking to their maid. He continued, "I'd like to help you. If you're willing, I can give you lessons and prepare you for a small audition. There's a scholarship program for talented musicians. You could have a real future in music." The maid looked down, tears forming in her eyes. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said gently. "You deserve this." For a moment, the room was completely silent. Then she whispered, "Thank you. I'll try." After the teacher left, the family didn't know how to feel. The parents were uncomfortable, but the children seemed curious. That night, the maid sat alone in her small room, her mind full of thoughts. Part of her was afraid, what if she failed? What if people laughed again? But another part of her was alive with excitement. The next week, the teacher started visiting twice a week. He brought simple music sheets and showed her how to read them. At first, she struggled. The black dots on the paper looked confusing. But he was patient and she was determined. Every night after finishing her work, she practiced for hours. Sometimes her fingers cramped. Sometimes her eyes burned from tiredness, but she didn't stop. The piano, which once felt like a secret, had now become her path to something bigger. The more she practiced, the more confident she became. The melodies that once came only from memory now grew richer, more powerful. The teacher told her she had something special, something even trained musicians often lost: honesty. "You play with your heart," he said one evening. "Never lose that." Weeks passed. The day of the audition drew near. It was going to be held at a small music hall in the city.
She had never been anywhere like that before.
The teacher arranged for her to have a day off and the family reluctantly agreed. The night before the audition, she sat at the piano one last time in the quiet living room. Her hands rested on the keys, her heart full of memories. Of the little girl who learned from an old man in a restaurant. Of the years spent cleaning floors, of the laughter she endured. She began to play the same melody from the video, the one that had changed everything. But this time it sounded different. It was no longer sad. It was strong and full of life. When she finished, she smiled to herself. Whatever happened tomorrow, she knew she had already come far beyond what she ever thought possible. The next morning, the family watched as she left in simple clothes, her hair tied neatly, her heart full of both fear and hope. The eldest son stood at the door and said quietly, "Good luck." She turned back and smiled. "Thank you." In the car with the teacher, she looked out the window as the city came closer. Her stomach fluttered with nerves, but deep down she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. When they reached the hall, she stepped inside slowly. The room smelled of wood and old music. Other contestants were there, dressed in elegant clothes, holding folders of sheet music. She felt out of place, but the teacher put a hand on her shoulder and said softly, "Just play like you always do. Play your story." She nodded. Her hands were shaking, but her heart was steady. When it was her turn, she walked to the piano, sat down, and closed her eyes for a moment. Then she began to play. The first few notes floated through the hall like a whisper. Then the melody grew, filling the room with warmth and sadness, hope and beauty all at once. The judges stopped writing. The audience fell silent. When she finished, there was a pause, a deep, meaningful silence before people began to clap. The sound echoed like thunder. Tears filled her eyes. She had done it. She had played not as a maid, not as a servant, but as herself, and though she didn't know it yet, that moment would change her life forever. The soft sound of applause still echoed in her ears long after she had finished playing. For a moment she sat frozen on the piano stool, unsure if what had just happened was real. The judges were smiling. Some had tears in their eyes. People in the audience stood and clapped for her, their faces filled with emotion. When she finally stood, her knees felt weak. She bowed shyly, her eyes glistening with tears. The teacher, standing near the side of the stage, smiled proudly. He had seen many talented students in his life, but something about her performance had touched him deeply. It wasn't perfect. She had missed a few notes, but the feeling behind her music had reached everyone in that room. As they left the hall, she still couldn't believe it. "Did I really do okay?" she asked softly. The teacher looked at her kindly. "You didn't just do okay. You made people feel something. That's what true music is." She smiled faintly, holding her small bag close to her chest. "Thank you for believing in me." That night, when she returned to the house, she expected everything to be the same. She quietly entered through the side door and went straight to her room. She didn't expect anyone to care about how her audition went. But something had changed. The eldest son was waiting in the kitchen. "How did it go?" he asked. She hesitated, unsure if he was teasing. "It went well," she said softly. "They liked it," he grinned. "That's amazing." Then after a pause, he added, "I told my friends you'd surprise everyone." For the first time, she laughed a little. It felt strange but good. The next few days passed quietly, but not for long. A video clip of her audition, recorded by someone in the audience, began to spread online. People were talking again. The same woman who had been in that viral video was now seen performing on stage. But this time the story was different. She wasn't just the maid who played piano. She was now the maid who could make people cry with her music. Comments filled every social platform. "She plays with so much heart. This is what true talent looks like. I can't believe she was working as a maid. She deserves the world." The teacher received calls from journalists and music organizations asking about her. He protected her privacy, but confirmed that she had been given a chance to join the scholarship program. The story spread even more. Soon, local TV reporters showed up at the house asking for interviews. The family was caught off guard. They had wanted the attention to disappear, but now it was too late. The world was talking about their maid, and everyone wanted to know her story. At first, the mother refused to let reporters inside. "She works for us," she said sharply. "We don't need this attention." But the maid stepped forward quietly. "It's okay," she said. "They just want to know about the music." Reporters were kind and curious. They asked her where she learned to play. She spoke softly but honestly. "I learned by listening. Music was my only escape when life felt heavy." When asked what her dream was, she smiled gently and said, "To keep learning and to share my music with people. I want others to know that no matter where you come from, your dreams still matter." The interview aired that evening, and within hours, her story became one of the most watched videos online. People from around the country sent her letters and messages. Some offered help, others shared their own stories of struggle and hope. Meanwhile, at the house, things started to feel different. The same people who had once ignored her now looked at her with surprise and respect. The children, who used to laugh at her, now asked her questions about the piano. Even the parents grew quieter around her, unsure how to treat someone the whole world admired. One morning, while she was preparing breakfast, the father came into the kitchen. He stood there for a moment, then said awkwardly, "You've made quite a name for yourself." She turned around, unsure how to respond. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said quickly. He shook his head. No trouble, just unexpected congratulations." Those simple words meant more to her than he probably realized. It was the first time he had spoken to her with any kind of respect. The teacher soon called her with more news. "You've been accepted," he said excitedly. "The scholarship committee wants you to join the music academy next month." Her heart stopped for a second. "Really?" she whispered. "Yes," he said. "You'll get full training and a place to stay." "This is your chance," she thanked him over and over. When she hung up, she sat on her bed for a long time trying to take it all in. For years she had cleaned floors and washed dishes, believing that her dreams had ended long ago, and now somehow her life was changing faster than she could understand. That evening she went to the piano once again. She ran her fingers across the keys gently, almost like saying goodbye. She would soon leave the house that had been both her prison and her secret home. The eldest son came into the room quietly. "You're leaving soon, huh?" She nodded. "Yes, the teacher said next month." He hesitated. "I never said it before, but I'm really proud of you," she smiled softly. "Thank you. And thank you for the video, even if it started as a joke. It changed my life." He looked down embarrassed. "Yeah, I didn't mean to hurt you." "I just didn't think anyone would care." She shook her head. "It's okay. Sometimes good things come from unexpected places." That night she played one last song before sleeping. It was gentle and full of warmth. As she played, she remembered her younger self, the little girl watching an old man play in a restaurant, dreaming of one day touching a piano again. Now that dream was real. When the day came for her to leave, the family stood at the gate. The children hugged her. The mother handed her a small envelope with money, and the father said, "We wish you luck. You've worked hard. You deserve this." Tears filled her eyes. "Thank you for letting me go," she said. As she walked away, carrying her small bag, the sun shone softly on her face. She looked back one last time at the house that had once felt like a cage, but had also been the place where her music was reborn. Life at the academy was not easy. Everything was new to her. The rules, the schedules, even the way people talked about music. She was older than most students and had no formal background. At first she felt out of place. Some students whispered behind her back, wondering how a maid had gotten into their program, but she ignored the voices. She focused on her practice, spending hours in the piano room. The teachers admired her dedication. She didn't have the best technique yet, but she played with honesty that no one could teach. Her fingers moved like they were speaking straight from the heart. One afternoon, during a class recital, she played a song she had written herself. It was a mix of sadness and light, a reflection of her life. When she finished, the room was silent. Then slowly, her classmates began to clap. Even the ones who had doubted her stood up to applaud. Afterward, one of the teachers said, "Your music reminds us why we love this art. It's real." She smiled shyly. "I only play what I feel." Over the next few months, she grew more confident. She started performing at small events organized by the academy. Each time she played, the audience was drawn in by her emotion and simplicity. She didn't try to impress anyone. She just played from her heart. Back at her old employer's house, the family often saw her on TV or online. The eldest son followed her progress, sharing her performances proudly with his friends. "That's her," he'd say. "She used to work at our house." His voice carried both pride and guilt. The mother sometimes watched quietly, shaking her head in disbelief. "Who would have thought?" she would whisper. The maid, now a rising musician, never forgot them. She didn't hold anger in her heart. She only felt gratitude for the piano that had given her a second chance at life. Every song she played told a piece of her story, the silence, the pain, the laughter, and the small moments of kindness that had kept her going. And as the lights of each stage shone down on her, she no longer saw herself as the invisible maid. She was a musician, a storyteller, and a reminder to the world that greatness can bloom in the most unexpected places. Her journey was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. Life at the music academy slowly started to feel like home. The first few weeks had been hard, but she was learning how to fit in. Every morning she woke up before sunrise, took her small notebook, and walked to the piano room before anyone else arrived. The hall would be empty, the sound of her footsteps echoing softly against the walls. She would sit quietly at the piano, take a deep breath, and begin to play. The early light would fall across the black and white keys, and the music would fill the room like gentle waves. It was in those quiet hours that she felt most alive. The teachers noticed her dedication. She never missed a class, never complained, and always asked questions. She wrote notes carefully, even when she didn't fully understand everything. Her classmates, who once doubted her, began to respect her. They saw that her talent was not an accident. It came from years of struggle, patience, and heart. One afternoon, the head of the academy announced an upcoming event, a national competition for rising musicians. The best students would be chosen to perform on stage in front of professional judges, famous composers, and a live audience. The winner would get a contract to perform with an orchestra. Everyone in the academy was excited. The halls buzzed with talk about the competition. Many students practiced for hours, choosing difficult pieces to impress the judges. When she heard about it, her heart beat faster. The thought of playing in front of so many people made her nervous. She had performed before, but never at such a big event. Still, her teacher encouraged her. "You should do it," he said. "This is your moment. Don't be afraid," she hesitated. "But the others are much better. They know theory. They can read music faster than I can." The teacher smiled. "Yes, maybe. But they don't have what you have. You play from the soul. That cannot be taught." She thought about it for days. Each night she sat at the piano wondering if she was good enough. Then one evening, as she played the melody that had started it all, the one from the video, she realized something. That song had carried her from the dark corners of silence to a world full of light. Maybe it was time to let it speak again, this time to the whole world. She told the teacher she would join the competition. From that day on, she practiced harder than ever before. She spent hours polishing every note, not for perfection, but for emotion. She wanted her music to tell her story, the story of a girl who was once invisible, who found her strength through the piano. As the competition day approached, her nerves grew stronger. The night before, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake thinking about everything she had been through, the long days of cleaning, the laughter she had endured, the kind people who had believed in her. She felt both scared and thankful. The next morning, she dressed simply, the same way she always did. She tied her hair back neatly, carried her sheet music, and whispered to herself, "You've come too far to be afraid now." The concert hall was grand and full of light. Dozens of contestants were already there, dressed in beautiful clothes, each carrying confidence in their eyes. When she walked in, a few people looked at her curiously. She didn't look like a typical performer, but she didn't care. She was there to play, not to impress. The teacher met her at the entrance and gave her a small nod. "Just be yourself," he said. She smiled nervously. "I'll try." As she waited for her turn, she listened to the others play. Their performances were perfect. Fast fingers, flawless technique. The audience clapped politely each time. But she noticed something missing. The music was beautiful, yet it didn't make her feel anything. When her name was called, she walked to the stage. Her hands trembled slightly and her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. The lights were bright and the audience seemed endless. She took a slow breath and sat down at the piano. For a moment, she just sat there in silence, her fingers resting on the keys. Then she closed her eyes and remembered the first time she ever played. Sitting on a broken stool in a restaurant, the smell of food in the air, the sound of an old man teaching her which keys made which notes. She smiled faintly, then she began to play. The first few notes came out soft and delicate like whispers. The sound spread across the hall, calm and emotional. The audience leaned forward, listening. As the melody grew, her movements became stronger, more confident. Every touch of the keys carried feeling, pain, hope, and freedom. The judges, who had been taking notes for every other performer, stopped writing. Their eyes were fixed on her. The music filled the room, not with perfection, but with truth. She didn't think about the audience or the judges. She wasn't trying to win. She was just telling her story through sound. The story of a girl who had once cleaned floors and hid her dreams. The girl who played secretly in the dark. When she reached the final notes, the music slowed, then faded into silence. For a moment, the hall was completely still. She sat there with her head slightly bowed, her fingers resting gently on the keys. Then the silence broke. The audience rose to their feet and clapped, their applause filling the hall. Some people shouted, "Bravo!" Others wiped their eyes. She looked up, stunned, tears shining in her eyes. The teacher stood among the crowd, clapping the loudest. His eyes were full of pride. She bowed shyly and left the stage, her hands still shaking. Backstage, other contestants congratulated her. Some sincerely, some still surprised. "That was incredible," one girl said. "How do you play with so much feeling?" She smiled. "I just play what's in my heart." Later that night, when the results were announced, her name was called among the top winners. The audience cheered again as she walked back to the stage. She received a certificate and a small golden trophy, but what mattered most to her wasn't the prize. It was the feeling that she had finally found her place in the world. The performance video quickly spread online. People recognized her immediately, the maid from the viral video. But now she wasn't a mystery anymore. She was a rising pianist, a symbol of hope for those who had been forgotten or underestimated. Messages came pouring in from across the country and even from abroad. Music schools invited her for special performances. A famous orchestra director reached out, asking if she would be interested in joining them for a concert. The teacher visited her the next day. "You've done it," he said proudly. "You've touched hearts everywhere." She smiled humbly. "I didn't expect any of this. That's why it's special," he said. "You played for love, not fame. People can feel that." As weeks passed, her story began appearing in newspapers and talk shows. People were inspired by her journey. She was invited to share her experiences on stage, to talk about how she never gave up despite the pain. Every time she spoke, she kept her words simple. "I'm not special," she would say softly. "I just didn't stop believing in the sound that made me feel alive." Meanwhile, her old employers saw her interviews on television. They watched in silence, remembering how they used to treat her. The father turned off the TV after one of her performances and said quietly, "We had no idea she carried that kind of light inside her." The eldest son smiled faintly. "We do now." Months later, she received an invitation to perform at a charity concert in her hometown. The teacher encouraged her to accept. "It will be good for you," he said. "Go back and show them who you've become," she agreed. When she arrived, she felt a rush of memories. The same streets, the same air, but everything looked different now. She had come full circle. The concert was held in the town's small theater. The seats were filled with people who had followed her journey online. When she stepped onto the stage, the audience clapped warmly. She looked around, her heart full. Among the crowd, she saw familiar faces, her former employers. They sat quietly in the back, watching her with soft, regretful eyes. She smiled not with anger, but with kindness. When she began to play, the music felt like forgiveness. Every note carried peace, not pain. The melody rose and filled the hall, wrapping everyone in a calm, gentle warmth. As the final note faded, the crowd stood up in applause. The sound echoed through the theater like waves of love washing over her. She stood, bowed, and smiled. This time, she wasn't the maid who played in secret. She was a musician, a symbol of strength and grace. Her courage had not only changed her own life, it had touched the hearts of thousands. And as she walked off the stage that night, she knew that her story was no longer about being hidden. It was about being seen, being heard, and showing the world that even in silence, dreams never truly die. After that charity concert, her life began to change in ways she had never imagined. The local newspapers wrote about her again, calling her the girl who turned pain into music. The videos of her performances kept spreading online, and her name started appearing in places she had never even dreamed of. One morning, while she was practicing in her small room at the academy, her teacher walked in with a letter in his hand. He had a smile that was hard to hide. "This came for you," he said, handing it over. She looked at the envelope, confused. It was stamped with the logo of an international music foundation. Slowly, she opened it and read the letter. Her eyes widened. It was an invitation to perform abroad, in a special concert for young prodigies in Europe. They wanted her to represent her country, to play in front of thousands of people. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her hand shook as she looked up at her teacher. "Is this real?" she whispered. He nodded proudly. "Yes, you deserve it." She felt tears rise in her eyes. "I don't even have a passport," she said softly, half laughing, half crying. "Then we'll get you one," he replied. "You've worked too hard to stop now." The following weeks were a blur of paperwork, practice, and preparation. The foundation helped arrange everything, her travel, her stay, even her gown for the performance. It all felt unreal. The girl who once scrubbed floors and played piano in secret was now packing her bags to perform on an international stage. When she boarded the plane, she looked out the window at the clouds, her heart full of mixed feelings, fear, excitement, and gratitude. She thought about her past, the struggles, the long nights she cried silently, wondering if life would ever change. And now, here she was, flying toward a dream she had never dared to dream. When she arrived, the concert hall took her breath away. It was massive, filled with shining lights, elegant seats, and the soft hum of instruments being tuned. She walked onto the stage during rehearsal, feeling the weight of it all. "This is where I'll play," she whispered to herself. The event brought together talented young musicians from all over the world. Many of them had been trained since childhood, guided by the best teachers. Yet when they met her, they were humble and curious. One of the performers asked, "Where did you learn to play like that?" She smiled shyly. "In a small house on an old piano." The girl looked surprised. "That's amazing," she said. "You must have so much music inside you." When the day of the concert finally came, she stood backstage, her heart pounding. The crowd was enormous, cameras flashing, and the sound of applause from the previous performer still echoing. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and remembered her teacher's words. "Play from your soul." When her name was called, she walked to the center of the stage. The lights were bright and warm, and the grand piano waited for her. She sat down slowly, rested her fingers on the keys, and let silence fill the hall. Then she began to play. The first notes flowed like water. The melody was a mix of sadness and hope, of past and present. Her music told her story again, without words, without tears. Each sound carried a piece of her journey. The loneliness, the kindness of strangers, the laughter that once hurt, the moments that healed. People listened in complete stillness. The judges closed their eyes. Some in the audience leaned forward, captured by the emotion that poured from her fingers. As she reached the final note, she let it fade slowly, letting the sound hang in the air. Then she lifted her hands off the keys and looked up. The hall was silent for a second. Then came the applause, loud, powerful, and full of admiration. She bowed deeply, her eyes glistening with tears. After the concert, reporters and musicians surrounded her, asking questions, taking photos, congratulating her. She answered politely, though her heart was still somewhere in the music she had just played. Later that night, back in her hotel room, she stood by the window, looking at the city lights. For the first time, she felt truly at peace. She thought about the people who had once mocked her, the ones who had made her feel small, and strangely, she felt no anger toward them anymore. She whispered softly, "Thank you for pushing me. Without that pain, I might never have found my strength." When she returned home, life didn't become perfect, but it became real. She continued studying music, but she also started teaching children who came from poor families like hers. She wanted to give them what she never had, the chance to dream early. In the afternoon, she would sit with them in a small classroom, showing them how to play simple melodies. Some children were shy, afraid of making mistakes. She would smile and say, "Don't worry about being perfect. Music is not about that. It's about feeling." The children adored her. They called her Miss Miracle, but she always said, "I'm not a miracle. I just never stopped trying." One day while she was finishing a class, an elderly man came to visit. It was the same man who had once taught her a few notes when she worked as a maid, the restaurant pianist. He had seen her story on television. When she saw him, she stood up in surprise, her eyes filling with tears. "I can't believe you're here," she said, hugging him gently. He laughed softly. "I always knew you had something special," he said. "You just needed a piano and a little faith." She smiled. "You gave me both." They sat together for a long time, talking about music and life. He told her he was proud of her, that her journey reminded him why he had fallen in love with music in the first place. As the years went by, she became more than just a performer. She became a storyteller through her music. Each concert she played was filled with honesty and emotion. She didn't chase fame. It came to her naturally because people could feel the truth in every note. Eventually, her performances took her to stages across the world. She played in Paris, Tokyo, New York, and beyond. Everywhere she went, people wanted to hear her story, the story of the maid who became a maestro. But no matter how successful she became, she never forgot where she came from. She still visited her hometown every year, bringing gifts for the children and holding small free concerts in the same theater where she had once forgiven her past. Her old employers attended one of those concerts again, this time sitting proudly in the front row. After the performance, they came up to her with tears in their eyes. "We're sorry," the father said quietly. "We didn't see who you really were back then." She smiled kindly. "It's all right," she said. "I've moved on, and I'm grateful for everything that led me here." The mother held her hand. "You've become such an inspiration. We tell everyone about you now." She laughed softly. "That's kind of you. Just keep believing in kindness. That's what truly changes people." As the crowd left the hall that night, she stayed behind for a while, sitting alone at the piano. The lights were dim and the room was quiet. She touched the keys gently and began to play again. Not for an audience, not for applause, but for herself. Her melody floated through the empty hall, calm and peaceful. She thought about how far she had come, from a bullied maid hiding her dreams to a woman who touched hearts across the world. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you, music. You gave me a voice when I had none." Years later, people would still talk about her story. They would tell their children about the girl who rose from the shadows, who found beauty in struggle, and who showed the world that greatness doesn't come from where you start, but from what you carry inside. Her students grew up and told others about her too. Some became musicians, some didn't, but all of them remembered her words. "Don't play to impress, play to express." And somewhere in a quiet classroom filled with laughter and the sound of small fingers on piano keys, her legacy continued, not through fame or trophies, but through the love of music she had passed on. Every note played by her students carried a part of her story, a story that began with pain but ended with peace. The world would remember her not just as a genius pianist, but as a reminder that kindness, faith, and persistence can turn even the darkest past into the most beautiful melody. And though she never said it out loud, deep inside she always knew. Every time she touched the piano, she wasn't just playing music. She was playing life itself.